Hello everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to our architecture tour of Dishonored. In this video, we are in sewers. And you might be thinking to yourself, architecture in sewers? Really? What possible architecture could there be in sewers? Well, architecture is, maybe there's not that much fancy architecture down here, but still, we can read the sewers just as we read any other built structure, believe it or not. So, in the gameplay, in the end of the last video, we escaped from the prison and we went into the sewers. It's actually back there that we entered the sewers. I can't actually go backwards beyond this point. It's not that important to look back there. So, if we imagine we start here, so we can see bricks, right? So I've been saying all along, like, bricks are human scale things, and you just put bricks on top of other bricks with your hands. And so the sizes of the bricks is something that you can recognize. It's something you can relate with because it's small pieces of bricks that you put together. And also, brick technology predates reinforced concrete and predates steel frame structures. And so all of this stuff, it's a strange mix of things, to be honest. Because look, there's the brick wall, and then there's these steel columns or steel portals. There's a steel column and beam up there, and then there's the concrete on top. And also there's the pipes, although the pipes leak. And what this says to me, or what I think, and also there's staircases here, even though this is supposed to be sewers. So what this says to me is that this might have been an old building or an old alleyway or an old basement at some point, and they reinforced it with a steel frame and then they covered it. And this is a thing that can happen because in older cities you would have open sewers. Back before sanitation was a big thing, there would be open sewers in cities, or like drainage ditches would be filled with sewage and they'd be open. And to improve sanitation, what they might do is they might cover those open sewers to close the sewers so that there's not open poop just in the city, in kind of rivers of poop in your city. So you kind of close them off to close the sewers and to improve sanitation. And this almost looks like that. And in fact, like, if you look at this stuff, there's like handbills and there's signs down here. Dunwall Water District main drain. So this is a drain, but we're also underneath the street. So it almost seems like, and sometimes cities do this too, like you would build on top of things. So maybe this used to be the street level, but then they kind of closed it off to make the upper level the new street level, and then everything underneath became sewers. That can happen in cities sometimes. And this is kind of like that. It suggests to me that this is it, especially like windows like that in the sewers for some reason. Anyway, so down here, this is the drainage. This is the city's. Oh, it says that. Look at that. Behind the graffiti there, Lacroix Boulevard, City of Dunwall. So this used to be a street. This is a boulevard. It's not much of a boulevard anymore. So this used to be a boulevard, but they closed up the top, and then they turned it into a sewer, and then they put pipes in it. How interesting, right? So you can see that you can see the history of the city. Borough Street. Yeah, so these used to be streets, but they have subsequently been covered over and turned into sewers. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that so interesting? Alright, so now it's a sewer, and there's like a concrete pathway on either side. It's a brick tunnel they've turned it into. And I believe the pipes have been retrofitted in at a later date. I'm not sure what's in the pipes. So it might be a rainwater channel down there and then sewage in the pipes. I'm not too sure which is which. But again, for sanitation purposes, you would want to separate the rainwater from the sewage, because if you're going to treat the sewage before you discharge it into the ocean, then you don't want to have to treat the rainwater as well. Like the rainwater would flood your sewage treatment plant. So in the old days, everything is just one ditch. You just have an open ditch, the rain goes in the ditch, the sewage goes in the ditch, and everything just gets washed into the ocean, and all your poop is just going into the ocean. And it's not that good to just flush your poop into the ocean. It's not, you shouldn't do that. So as sanitation became more advanced, you would want to treat the poop. But in order to treat the poop efficiently, you don't want the rainwater in the treatment plant as well. So you have to create a separate system. So you have rainwater system, and then you have the sewage system separated. And this might be what this is. I'm not entirely sure because we don't actually see any poop in the pipes. So it could be that the pipes is the sewage, and then this is just the rainwater, and they've put the pipes in the same space, but it's separate. That's possible. But we're not entirely. Well, there's a lot of pipes here, so we're not entirely sure what all these pipes carry. No trespassing. I mean, isn't that interesting? No trespassing. There's a no trespassing sign in the sewers. But again, as we observed earlier, this used to be a street that's been covered up, and it became sewers. So it wasn't always sewers. So these signs for no trespassing comes from the time when these streets were, or when these sewers were still streets. Alright. So, more... Not sure how... Oh, this is like a sluice, I guess. Not sure why there's lights down here. I guess it lights for gameplay. But I mean, you wouldn't bother to light up sewers like this. Because it's just a waste of energy, right? So there's furniture and there's signage and there's corpses too. So there's people living in the sewers, or it seems like there are some. I mean, they're all dead now. But as we continue, it's the wrong button. As we continue, you'll notice some indication that there are people living in the sewers, and that again is a thing that happens. I mean, if your city has a lot of homelessness, or there's a poverty problem, or the people have to live somewhere. And sometimes the sewers are the best they can do because at least there's a roof. Although, having poop water come down on you is probably not the most sanitary thing. Even if you're poor. Yeah, and so like there's like basins and bottles and food. So the implication is that people are actually living down here. Unfortunately, that's the implication. No dumping allowed. Drain to the Wrenhaven River. Right. So these sorts of signs, again, like you're not allowed to dump pollution or sewage into the rainwater drainage, or at least that's what's supposed to happen. Sometimes things happen anyway. And interesting, right? So you come to here. There's a bigger space. And again, there's the brick walls, and then there's this reinforced concrete stuff, and this shape, like these cantilevers, these have to be steel reinforced concrete. And steel reinforced concrete would be new in the industrial era, which is what this game is kind of based on. And so we have to assume that this ceiling here, is new. And again, what might have happened is that this might have used to be like a big open drainage place, and then they just kind of closed it off at the top, or they reduced the size of the opening at the top, and then they barred over it. So they're closing up the sewers, or they're closing up the rainwater drainage so that it's less dangerous, right? I'm not sure if we should consider the brick to be contemporary with the concrete. It probably isn't. I mean, you could imagine, and in a lot of cities, they would do this, like there would be natural rivers, and then they would like channel the natural rivers into like artificial channels, so they would kind of reinforce the edge of the rivers. Paris, I think, is a good example of this. I wonder if I can find images of Paris and some cities in the Netherlands. Let's go to Paris and see if we can find an example. What's the river that goes through Paris? I forgot the name. Cyan, right. So, if we look at some of these pictures, so like in Paris, like this used to be a natural river, right? But because the city is right on the river, they would reinforce the edges of the river with these kind of blocks, and they would channel the river into these fixed shapes. And then if it becomes a sewer, which thank goodness the Seine is not a sewer, but you could imagine like this might have been a natural river at some point. And then they built brick walls on the side to make sure that to reinforce the edge of the rivers and also allow buildings to be built closer to the river. And then as it becomes a sewer, they afterwards put a top on top of that to close the sewer so it's not an open sewer anymore. And that is one possible evolution of a river in a city becoming a sewer. Like that's one possible way it happens. Although I don't think that's entirely the case here, because remember these used to be streets. So it's not like a river became a sewer and then it became covered. It's a street became a sewer and then it got covered. So if these were streets as well, this might have been a city square at some point. At some point, this might have been just an intersection in the city, and then it became a sewer, and then it got covered over. But the implication is that like the brick is not as new as the concrete ceiling. I think is the implication here. Although it could be from the same time period. The pipes, we don't know when the pipes came in. Probably around the same time as the concrete ceiling there. And we can't actually see what's above there, can we? No. Again, there's bodies here, right? So there's bodies and more bodies. Oh, they dump dead bodies down here, that's right. If you play the game, the plague victims get dumped down here. Which is probably not sanitary, but that's the story. Alright, let's come through here. No more street signs here, though. We don't know what streets these are. But they've been covered up and it's overgrown. And then we come to a vaguely natural cave, which is kind of weird. So the street goes into a cave system, but the cave system has pipes all over it and has been covered up, and so the cave has been co-opted into a sewer. No trespassing, we can't see through there. So again, like as I was saying, like natural rivers can become sewers. Just if people start flushing their sewage into the river, then it becomes a sewer, and then it gets covered over. So this might be what that is, especially since this is natural stone, I believe. So this might have been a natural river that became a part of the sewer. Let us climb up here. I mean, on the one hand, it's very interesting, but on the other hand, it's also difficult to interpret because it's so complicated, right? You can see hints of the series of events that change the old streets into sewers, but you're not entirely sure. Anyway, so there's more signs of habitation, like a shelf and money and pots and pans and boxes. What do we see here? So back here is like bottles. This might be someone's property. Actually, what happened here? Why would... Not sure if this makes any sense, because this corridor just ends in rocks. And it doesn't appear to be a cave-in, so I don't know how to interpret this. This might just be a mistake. Because it doesn't look like a cave-in, right? And it just ends in rocks, which doesn't really make any sense otherwise. I mean, if we assume it's meant to be a cave-in, then okay. It's just caved in. And I guess it would have been a side street that's no longer needed for the sewer system. Actually, can we see up there? No. No, we can't see up there. Let me climb back up here. So we have, lights and chairs and furniture and things. And in fact, over here, we have beds. So, I mean, if we weren't certain before, now we are completely certain that there are in fact people living in the sewers. Bottle Street. So again, I think this is meant to be a street. The Hound Pits. And there's more posters, but this is natural stone. Look at this. The water is flowing over natural stone. If I can get my head underneath this. No, I can't. So, I think this is natural stone down here that we're walking on. And then there's like a concrete channel for the water, and then there's a brick roof over it. So again, I'm reading this as a natural river that has been channeled and turned into a sewer and then covered up, is how I'm reading this. And like everything I'm seeing is consistent with that. Alright, so let's keep going. And more bodies, more plague victims. That's sad days. Dunwall Water District main pumping station. Right, so these bars and these crates would have been built after the thing was covered over. Or after the sewer was closed, probably. Because, I mean, if it used to be a street, this stuff doesn't make sense as a street. It only makes sense as a sewer. Alright, so there's sewage infrastructure here. Dams to stop the flow of water if necessary. And you would do this to control flooding, right? I mean, if there's too much water downstream, then you might, close the floodgates to let the lower bits drain out before you let more water through. So this is water management stuff. And stuff that we expect to find in sewers, and not necessarily in streets. Okay, I'm gonna load the game here. There's enemies down there, and we can't climb back up. That's why I'm gonna load the game. Oh, this vehicle we should probably talk about too. Now, this is, you can't really tell, can you? It's meant to be a vehicle. It's a two-seater. We'll see more of this stuff later on, but it's the first hint of mechanized land transport. If you remember at the start of the game, we went into the game on a motorized boat. And this is a motorized land transport. So again, hints at the technology level of the game. We can't see through that. Alright, let me load the next part. Load the game. Yes. So I prepared this earlier. If we go back, we're a little too far forward actually. Let me just go back a little bit. This is something I prepared earlier. So, what the? Oh, I got burned by the fire. So, we ended, let me just eat this rat, get some health back. Ended up there. So if you jump down here, there are these guards. And so you have to fight through the guards. I mean, it's not a big deal, but as I said, I don't want to have gameplay through here, so we can't go back up. So you come down there, and then you end up in another part of the sewer with a stealth or combat sequence, and you can see there's like reeds growing in the sewer. Funny. So let's see. Rocks and brick and pipes and a sewer. Is that timber? This is timber that we're standing on. It's a little bit odd. I'm not sure what to make of this. Because look, there's natural stone. And then there's a vaulted, look at that, that's so complicated, look at that. There's like a brick arches holding up a brick ceiling. So this is old stuff, right? I mean, it's not the reinforced concrete ceiling, but then there's pipes here. There's a lot of pipes here. I'm not sure what this is meant to be. And the sewer actually goes around in a little circle. And there's a bunch of dead ends on either side. I mean, if you really think about it, I'm not sure that it entirely makes... Huh. We might be underneath a factory or something. I'm not sure it entirely makes sense because... Oh, let me just break through here. Because there's actually nowhere for the water to go. If you look at this. So here, this is a dead end. The other side is a dead end. Over here, the exit is higher up. And then on the other side, the exit is also higher up. So the question then is, where does all the water go? Like, the water keeps pouring in, but where does it leave? I'm not sure that it leaves anywhere, unless there's meant to be an exit. Oh, here? We can't go that way. Maybe that's where the water's supposed to leave. Anyway, so there's guards down here. City guards, so it's not just homeless people being poor and living in the sewers. Not sure why there's city guards here either. Like, what are they guarding? They're guarding the sewers. I don't know. This part is a little bit strange. Yeah, I mean, that's the best I can say about it. Alright, but it's a similar pattern, right? So it's sewers and bricked over. Drain to the Wrenhaven River. And then as we walk this way, there's a few interesting bits. So the light shows you where to go to leave. Oh, look at that! This is stonework. So there's brick and there's stone and there's concrete. So this is apparently a different building, but then there's also a natural cave here. As we walk forward, there's that. So that makes a lot of noise, and it's flashing light too. So it's supposed to. I mean, it's supposed to draw your gaze upwards. I mean, I was always looking upwards because I knew that was coming. But usually when people play video games, they don't look up. I mean, most people, during most of their lives, don't look up very much. So that sound is supposed to make you look up. And since we are prompted to... I mean, we saw the vehicles on the track, so there's like train-type things in the city. And that is something that is different from our technology and our world, right? So our cities don't have these sorts of personal train systems. So this is new, right? The game is pointing out to you that this is a novel thing in the game environment. Also, it shows us that we are out of the underground because this is the open sky. And we are kind of in the city because you can see shapes of houses around us. And there's the whaling ship over there, Greaves Lightning Oil, and there's a whaling boat. Which the shape of the boat is also fictional, right? Like our boats aren't that shape. So this is like a retro-futuristic technology that the game is trying to point our attention towards. And then as we continue to come through this channel, oh, bright lights, and we're out.
Over here, quickly! I'm a friend.
Wow, look at this vista! Hey, landscape. So you walk straight into the sun, which is obviously intentional because ooh, lights. And then this whaling ship comes across because the game really wants you to see this whaling ship. This is like the sense of wonder, right? Like you walk through the sewers, or you spend all that time walking through sewers. It's like, oh my god, sewers. It's not the most impressive thing in the world. So after going through all that, the game rewards you with this thing, a whale on a boat. And the boat is just as strange as the whale. They're both strange. So this is the game giving you something that you've never seen before. Like this is the fiction. This is the amazing thing, and it goes in front of the sun, and so the light rays, ooh, lighting effects. Right, so that looks great. We'll get back to whales and ships, I think, later on in the game. For now, Samuel wants us to go to the Hound's Pit pub, or Hound Pit's pub, whatever that is. Also, in the distance, we can see the rest of the city. And if you're keeping track of the geography, the palace is back up the river that way, or is it down the river? I think it's down the river actually. Okay, the palace is up back that way. And from the palace, we could have seen this over to the left. Now it's in front of us, and so the palace is... Oh, my bad. Palace is that way. I need to make sure I point the right way on the video. So the palace is over that way, which is spatially consistent. And if you look back here, more water draining out of there. I think that's all I have to say about the sewers. So that's super interesting, isn't it? The sewers used to be streets. They used to be streets, and they used to be natural rivers. Or at least natural creeks, I guess, natural channels. And then they were channeled and covered up and turned into sewers and rainwater or stormwater drainage. Isn't that interesting? And like the street signs are still there, so you can kind of see the history of the city in the sewers. See, there is architecture in the sewers, you know what I mean? You thought there was no architecture in sewers. Turns out there used to be city streets. Alright, so I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we're going to follow Samuel, take his boat, and we'll go check out the Hound Pits pub, I think is what it's called. Alright. I'll see you there.